In a striking turn of events, U.S. President Donald Trump has reignited tensions with China by imposing a blanket 10% tariff on its goods, a move that has sent shockwaves through global markets and prompted immediate reactions from Beijing. Trump's decision, which he announced on Saturday, also includes a hefty 25% tariff on both Canada and Mexico, citing their alleged failures to curb illegal immigration and drug trafficking into the United States. As the dust begins to settle, Chinese President Xi Jinping is weighing his options for retaliation, a decision that could have far-reaching implications for international trade dynamics. Following Trump's announcement, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was quick to respond, implementing a counter-tariff of 25% on $107 billion worth of U.S. goods. Meanwhile, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum also pledged to retaliate, underscoring the precarious state of North American trade relations. However, China's response has been notably tempered. The Chinese Commerce Ministry expressed strong dissatisfaction with the tariffs and vowed to take corresponding countermeasures, although it did not elaborate on the specific actions it might undertake. This measured response is consistent with China's historical approach during trade disputes, where it often waits for tariffs to take effect before escalating its retaliation. Experts suggest that Xi has a variety of strategies at his disposal beyond merely imposing reciprocal tariffs. Gary Ng, a senior economist at Natixis SA, highlighted potential options such as export controls on critical minerals and restrictions on market access for American companies operating in China. The Chinese government has recently passed a series of laws that enhance its control over domestic business dealings, providing Xi with additional leverage. However, the current situation is more complex than previous trade skirmishes. Unlike earlier confrontations where China was the primary target, this time Trump has also targeted allies, which could open avenues for China to strengthen trade relationships with other nations. The implications of Trump's tariffs are significant for China's economy. Bloomberg Economics estimates that the new levy could eliminate as much as 40% of Chinese goods exports to the U.S., potentially threatening 0.9% of China's GDP. As Xi's government relies heavily on exports to maintain economic growth, the urgency for Beijing to stimulate domestic demand is growing. Economists had already anticipated an increase in fiscal spending to combat deflationary pressures, and the tariffs may necessitate an even more aggressive approach. "I think China hasn't made the final decision to retaliate or not," said Jiwei Zhang, president and chief economist at Pinpoint Asset Management. "They did say they would take countermeasures, which I think doesn't rule out tariffs." The intricate dance of trade negotiations between the two powers is expected to continue, with both sides having expressed a desire to keep communication lines open. Another key factor in this unfolding drama is China's currency, the yuan, which recently breached a psychological milestone of 7.3 per dollar. This devaluation could allow Beijing to absorb some of the economic shock caused by the tariffs, according to Josh Lipsky, senior director of the Geoeconomics Center at the Atlantic Council. He noted that while the rhetoric from Beijing would likely be sharp, the economic retaliation might be more subdued in practice. As Trump's administration intensifies its scrutiny of China's compliance with trade agreements, the possibility of further tariffs looms large. Trump's recent comments suggest he may be considering tariffs as high as 60%. Alongside an investigation into China's adherence to the Phase 1 trade deal from his first term, which is due by April 1. This deal had already demonstrated the political limits of China's willingness to acquiesce to U.S. demands without inflicting substantial domestic harm. In this precarious environment, China faces the challenge of crafting a response that asserts its position without triggering an uncontrollable escalation of trade hostilities. As Chang Shu and David Chu of Bloomberg Economics noted, politically China needed to respond in some way, but the key will be to calibrate its actions carefully to avoid a full-blown trade war that could severely impact an already fragile economic recovery. Looking ahead, the interplay between U.S. and Chinese economic policies will continue to evolve, with potential ripple effects felt across global markets. The coming weeks will likely reveal how both nations navigate this renewed conflict. as well as the broader implications for international trade and economic stability. As the world watches closely, Xi's next steps will be critical in determining the course of US-China relations in the months to come. And the rapidly evolving landscape of global technology and economics developments in artificial intelligence, AI, and international trade are shaping the geopolitical narrative. With the rise of innovative companies like DeepSeek in China, the nation is poised to challenge the traditional dominance of the United States in the AI sector while simultaneously grappling with the implications of renewed trade tensions under the Trump administration. DeepSeek, a relatively obscure startup, has emerged as a potent force in AI, showcasing the ambitions of China's leadership under President Xi Jinping. The company's recent advancements highlight an aggressive push to enhance China's technological capabilities, particularly following a pivotal moment in 2017 when the AI program AlphaGo defeated a top Chinese player. In response, the Chinese government set an ambitious goal of becoming a global AI leader by 2030, investing heavily in research and development. Now, with DeepSeek's latest AI model R1 unveiled, industry experts are observing how its capabilities might disrupt the competitive landscape. Despite its success, DeepSeek's rise raises critical questions about the Chinese Communist Party's CCP control over emerging technologies. As noted by Matt Sheehan from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the party's instinct towards regulation and oversight may escalate as it seeks to maintain stability and control in the face of rapid technological disruption. The founder of DeepSeek, Liang Wenfeng, recently engaged with Premier Li Chang, signaling the government's interest in the company's trajectory and the potential for regulatory intervention. The implications of DeepSeek's success extend beyond China's borders. With its open-source model, the company could provide a more affordable alternative for developing nations looking for advanced AI solutions, potentially altering the global technology balance. Analysts like Gregory C. Allen underscore that while military applications of AI may proceed unimpeded, the private sector will face an intricate web of regulatory hurdles shaped by the CCP's priorities. As China navigates its internal AI ambitions, it must also contend with external pressures, particularly from the United States. The recent announcement of a new wave of tariffs under President Trump's administration is causing ripples across the Chinese manufacturing landscape. Factories that once thrived under the pre-Trump trade environment are now bracing for the impact of potentially elevated tariffs on a wide array of consumer goods. This situation has led many businesses to consider relocating operations to countries like Vietnam and Cambodia, where the cost of production may be more favorable in light of increasing tariffs. Chinese manufacturers like Mr. Peng's boot factory in Jiangsu are feeling the strain of this impending trade war, with orders dwindling and workforce numbers shrinking. The prospect of a 10% blanket tariff could exacerbate these challenges, forcing businesses to confront difficult decisions about the future. Factory owners express a desire to maintain their workforce but are increasingly aware that the geopolitical landscape is shifting under their feet. In Cambodia, where a significant influx of Chinese manufacturing has occurred due to these pressures, the local economy is transforming. Business owners like Huang Xiaodong are seizing opportunities presented by the backlash against Chinese goods in the U.S., setting up factories that cater to major American retailers while navigating the complexities of a shifting supply chain. Despite the challenges posed by tariffs, Chinese firms are adapting, with many looking to diversify their production bases and minimize risks. The interplay between technological advancement and trade policy underscores the delicate balance both China and the U.S. must navigate. With President Trump's administration taking a firmer stance on tariffs and trade practices, the potential for a protracted conflict looms. Yet the necessity for cooperation remains, as both nations rely on each other for trade and technological innovation. As the global landscape continues to evolve, the future of AI development in China, influenced by both domestic aspirations and international pressures, will play a pivotal role in determining the trajectory of global technology leadership. With the stakes higher than ever, observers will be keenly watching how these dynamics unfold, particularly in the interplay between innovation and regulation, as well as the potential for escalating trade tensions to reshape economic relationships worldwide. Recent developments in global trade and economic dynamics reveal a precarious situation for China and its trading partners, exacerbated by the renewed tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. As China grapples with missed growth targets and rising public discontent, the latest round of tariffs threatens to deepen the country's economic challenges while igniting retaliatory measures from Canada and Mexico. Reports indicate that over half of China's provinces have failed to meet their self-imposed growth targets, a troubling indicator of the nation's waning economic momentum. Provinces like Hainan, once considered prosperous, are now part of a larger narrative of economic distress. Former intelligence officer and China expert Jayadeva Ranade highlights that the situation has escalated to the point where citizens are implicitly criticizing President Xi Jinping's policies, an act fraught with risk in the tightly controlled political landscape of China. A recent article in the People's Daily, the official newspaper of the Communist Party, underscores the growing discontent among private entrepreneurs who are often viewed as the engines of economic growth. Instead, Xi's administration has prioritized state-owned enterprises, leaving many in the private sector feeling neglected. Ranade notes that this discontent is compounded by Xi's aggressive targeting of bankers and financial regulators, many of whom have faced imprisonment, further eroding trust in the system. The geopolitical landscape has become increasingly fraught as Trump's administration imposes a 10% tariff on Chinese goods alongside 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico. In a move that has drawn swift criticism, Trudeau and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced their intentions to retaliate, setting the stage for a potential trade war that could reshape global supply chains. The U.S. tariffs, which are set to take effect shortly, threaten to disproportionately impact the housing market and consumer prices, with estimates indicating a possible 1.2% decrease in U.S. GDP. While the immediate responses from Canada and Mexico were swift, both countries moving to impose their own tariffs, China's reaction has been more measured. The Chinese Commerce Ministry expressed strong dissatisfaction and vowed to implement corresponding countermeasures, though specifics remain unclear. Analysts suggest that China's options for retaliation could include export controls on critical minerals or restrictions on American firms operating within its borders. The economic ramifications of these tariffs are expected to be significant, particularly for China, where exports have become a crucial lifeline amid a slowing domestic economy. Bloomberg Economics estimates that Trump's tariffs could jeopardize nearly 40% of Chinese goods exports to the U.S., with potential knock-on effects threatening to contract China's GDP by 0.9%. This situation is made more complex by the fact that, unlike during previous trade tensions, Trump's current strategy targets not only China but also allied nations, thereby reshaping the global trade framework. In this context, the looming question remains: how will China navigate this renewed economic assault while maintaining its growth trajectory? Economists predict that Beijing may need to ramp up fiscal spending to counter deflationary pressures and stimulate consumer demand. The delicate balance between retaliatory measures and diplomatic negotiations will be crucial as both nations grapple with the consequences of their respective trade policies. As the situation continues to develop, the potential for a prolonged trade conflict looms large. The interplay between economic strategy and political maneuvering will undoubtedly shape the future of U.S.-China relations as well as the broader global economic landscape, with both sides seemingly preparing for a drawn-out confrontation. The next steps taken by Xi and Trump will be pivotal in determining the trajectory of international trade relations and economic stability in the coming years. In a significant move that, in the ever-evolving landscape of global geopolitics, the subtleties of diplomatic engagement can often mask deeper tensions. China's approach, often termed smile diplomacy, is currently under scrutiny as analysts warn that its apparent goodwill toward nations like Japan and India may be more a facade than a genuine sentiment. Recent developments indicate that while China extends its diplomatic hand, the underlying currents of rivalry and suspicion continue to shape the international narrative. The complexities of China's diplomatic overtures were underscored by the historical context shared by Hiroyuki Akita, who referenced advice from a senior Russian official to Japanese policymakers. This counsel highlighted the unpredictable nature of Chinese foreign policy, which can shift dramatically and unexpectedly. Reminiscent of past Soviet practices. Such insights prompt nations to remain vigilant and discerning in their interactions with Beijing. The latest diplomatic interactions between China and India demonstrate this cautious engagement. After a prolonged hiatus, the two countries have recommenced direct air services and are working to resolve trade and economic differences. The recent meeting between India's top diplomat Vikram Misri and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is a hopeful sign, suggesting a potential thaw in relations that have been strained since the deadly clashes in the Himalayas in 2020. Misri expressed India's commitment to enhancing bilateral relations, while Wang emphasized the importance of this engagement for both nations and the broader global South. However, the path forward remains fraught with challenges. The ongoing border disputes and differing strategic priorities continue to create obstacles to a seamless rapprochement. The geopolitical landscape is further complicated by India's alignment with the United States, particularly in light of growing concerns over China's regional dominance. As both nations navigate their intertwined destinies, the specter of mistrust looms large, reminding observers that any progress may be tentative at best. In parallel, the United States is actively seeking to counter China's rising influence in Latin America, a region where Beijing has significantly increased its economic footprint in recent years. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to Panama and neighboring countries is emblematic of this strategic pivot. Rubio's remarks underscore a clear intention to diminish China's growing presence, which has raised alarm bells in Washington. The rhetoric surrounding the Panama Canal, once a symbol of U.S. influence, has taken a confrontational tone under the Trump administration, further complicating relations with Panama and the broader region. Experts like Mauricio Claver-Carrón, the U.S. Special Envoy for Latin America, articulate the national security risks associated with Chinese investments and initiatives in the area, suggesting that the presence of Chinese companies could pose threats not only to U.S. interests but also to the sovereignty of Latin American nations. The existing relationships in the region, marked by what has been termed dollar diplomacy, indicate a strategic shift as countries align more closely with Beijing, often at the expense of long-standing U.S. partnerships. As both the U.S. and China intensify their diplomatic efforts, the implications of their rivalry are likely to shape regional dynamics in significant ways. For instance, the ongoing competition for influence in the Pacific reflects similar patterns seen in Latin America, where nations are increasingly leveraging their relationships with both superpowers to maximize economic benefits. The notion of being a backyard to any power is increasingly outdated as countries assert their agency in navigating complex international relationships. Looking ahead, the interplay between China and India, as well as the U.S. and Latin America, will require careful diplomacy and strategic foresight. The fragility of recent agreements signals that while pathways to cooperation are being explored, the entrenched issues of trust and historical grievances will demand persistent effort and goodwill from all parties involved. As global dynamics continue to shift, the ability of nations to engage in constructive dialogue will be critical in determining the future of international relations in both Asia and the Americas.